Hello and welcome back to the Old Soul Millennial channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing an unboxing, assembly, and initial review of this Bilt Hard 6.5 ton electric log splitter. Now those of you that regularly watch my channel will probably know that I am a big fan of electric log splitters. They are reliable, quiet, easy to operate, and most importantly in my opinion, you're not inhaling exhaust fumes like you would when you operate a conventional petrol or gas powered log splitter. So again, a big fan of the electric log splitters, although they're definitely not going to have the power of, say, the 27 or 30 ton log splitters, but generally these 6.5 ton units will do almost everything you need. Anyway, company Bilt Hard reached out to me and they said, hey, we'd like to send you out this unit in exchange for you doing some videos about it. So I just want to be clear and transparent about my arrangement with the company. They're not paying me any money. They just sent me the unit out for free in exchange for making some videos about the unit. Now, I do plan to do 3 initial videos about this unit. Today's video is going to be the unboxing, assembly, and initial review. Video number 2 is going to be some heavy-duty testing in which we're going to go through some large rounds. And video number 3, I'm going to do some modifications to this unit that I believe are going to make it a lot more efficient to operate, which you'll see what I'm talking about down the road here. So without further ado, let's start unboxing this package and see what's inside. So we actually have an outer box. I guess this is really just the main shipping box. It also doesn't have any information as to what's inside the outer box. So I guess that's good if porch pirates are a problem in your area. But if we look inside, we can see the box for the actual splitter itself. There's also a little bit of cardboard to provide a little bit of protection during the shipping process. A little bit of foam padding on this end of the box. Perhaps that's where the motor is, not 100% sure. But anyway, let's continue the unboxing process. Again, this box is very heavy, so I'm gonna try and just open everything up the way it is. If you have 2 people, maybe a little bit easier, but I'm working with what I got. So my suspicions are confirmed where there's this extra foam padding. That is the side of the box that has the motor, so that's a good thing. Now, I believe Bilt Hard makes 2 versions of this splitter. One version comes with a stand and one comes without a stand, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, I asked for the version with the stand because I feel like that's pretty necessary. Anyway, I'm gonna take the stand and hardware out of the box. I'll put it on the welding table and then we'll kind of go over everything that's included in the box. All right, so included in the box, we have the stand, and the stand consists of 6 pieces of black square tubing. Looks like it's powder coat. Pretty nice finish on that. Additionally, we have some assembly bolts and our instruction manual. Now, the only thing I'm not seeing on the table are the wheels, because we're gonna have to put wheels onto the stand, and it looks like the wheels are actually on the unit right now. So we're going to have to remove those wheels from the unit in order to put them on the stand. In order to get this unit higher up off the ground, I'm going to utilize my homemade jib crane trailer. That'll make it a lot easier to work on. Have a stabilizer leg down. Let's lift her up. Now, in order to remove these wheels off the splitter, it looks like we have to remove this plastic hubcap, so I'm going to try and remove these hubcaps with a right-handed pick. And we also have a cotter pin, and it looks like we have a washer in there, so let's straighten out this cotter pin with a pair of small needle nose pliers. Pull that out and slide the wheel off. Repeat the process on the other side. Wheel construction, plastic, and maybe a hard rubber tire. Very hard rubber if I had to guess. Additionally, there are no bearings in these wheels. These are all friction wheels. Now, while we still have this unit suspended, we are going to need to remove the front leg because we're going to be replacing it with the stand. So we're going to need to remove 5 carriage bolts, and they are 13mm nuts. So now it is time to start assembling this stand. Now, first thing I want to mention is that there are 2 bags of hardware included in this kit. First, we have the M8 by 12 bolts. And these are the bolts we're going to utilize to assemble the stand, which you'll see here momentarily. And then the second bag is M8 by 16. And these are the bolts used to attach the stand to the splitter itself. As for stand assembly, it looks pretty simplistic. First, we're going to start with the piece of square tubing that has the 2 axle nubs welded onto it. And then we're going to look for the long tube that doesn't have any welding, it's just a piece of tubing. So we're going to insert that into the center cross piece here. And then we're going to take one of our bolts. We're going to take our M8 by 12 bolt. And there's actually nuts welded on these nubs. So all we're going to do is just get this bolt started. We're not going to tighten anything down yet. But we're just going to get everything started because once we mount the splitter onto the stand, it may require some basic adjustment. Next piece we're going to want to look for is a piece that looks like this. So the top of this is going to attach to the bottom of the splitter. So this long shaft is going to connect to this leg right here like so. So we'll just slide that in, get another bolt started. Now on the lower end of this main vertical piece, we're going to utilize this piece, which this just looks like almost like a T. So that's going to go on the bottom of this main stand piece. And again, when you utilize the M12 bolt, there's a nut on the back side of this, so we'll just get this started. Then finally right here, the axle side of the stand, there are 2 vertical pieces of tubing, and the other pieces that are going to be received into there are these pieces that have a piece of flat on an angle welded onto the end. Now, it looks like these are going to be positioned like this as to where they kind of would intersect with one another, so we're just going to insert these into the stand like so. Pretty straightforward. And again, we're going to take our M8 by 12 bolts and just get these started in the welded on nuts. Now let's reinstall these wheels on these axle nubs. So first thing I want you to pay attention to is that there is an outside and an inside to these wheels. If you look at this part, it's kind of like a round cylinder that protrudes outward. Well, that's going to face in. This is going to face out. This is where that hubcap kind of locks into the wheel. So there's no inner washer apparently. We just slide this in here like so. I will say that the shaft was lubricated, which that is good. So next we're going to put our washer on. Finally, I'm going to try and reutilize the cotter pin that was originally on these wheels. Slide this cotter pin in. Pull it through and bend the end like so. And then finally we'll just pop this hubcap back in here. A little bit of play, but to be expected, I suppose. Repeat the process on the other side of the axle shaft here. Now that our stand is fully assembled, we can go ahead and place that on the ground, and the stand is now ready to receive the splitter itself. I wanted to show you this depiction so you have a better understanding as to which bolts go where. Now, if you recall, a few moments ago, I went over the 2 bags of hardware that are included in this kit. Well, now we're going to need the second bag of hardware, and again, these are the M8 by 16 bolts. They include 3 bolts, but we're only going to need 2 of them. For the back side. I would call this the back side of the splitter, you know, where the motor is. But this is the portion where we have those 2 pieces of tubing going straight up. We're going to need 1 set of hardware here and 1 set of hardware here. So we're going to need 2 of these, not 3, so they do include an extra piece. And then as for the front side of the splitter, where the wedge is, that's going to connect to the single post and we're going to reutilize those carriage bolts that we took off earlier when we removed that front leg stand. So let's go ahead, take the stand off the table, and lower the splitter onto the stand. Now I'm going to start by connecting the backside of the splitter to the stand. And I'm going to get the camera a little bit closer because I want to show you how the old axle shaft connects to the vertical stand posts. So if you take a look at the backside of the splitter, you can see the old axle posts sticking out. So what's going to happen, I think the easiest way to do this is to remove one of the vertical stands. We'll lower this down a little bit further. If you don't have a witch crane, you're definitely going to need a second person for this. But we're going to insert the axle shaft into a hole, the lower hole in this tubing right here. So I just show you that hole. We're going to insert that into there like so. And then I'm going to get the other one, insert it into the axle shaft. Now this gets a little bit tricky. I might just end up lifting this up and inserting both legs down. I think that's exactly what I'm going to do because I have the winch. Just getting it lined up back into the bottom receivers of the stand. Those are back in place, and that is how that connects to the old axle shafts on the back side of the splitter. Now we're looking at the front side of the splitter, and this just gets received into here like so. So I'll lower down the winch a little bit further. And I'm looking for these bolt holes to line up. Mind you, we haven't really tightened anything down yet, so if we need to adjust, expand or contract the lower connecting rod, we can do that to ensure that all the bolt holes line up. And of course, so there's not any unnecessary torsional force on the stand. So now I'm going to attach the bolts for the back vertical legs of the stand that connect to the splitter itself. I'm noticing that the hole is slightly off. It's actually in that direction a little bit here, so we may have a little bit of trouble aligning this. You can see how it's kind of directed into the back, so I think it's going to be just fine, but it is a little bit challenging getting the nut on back here because you kind of have to sneak your hands back here in between the motor and the stand. Alright, we have this side started. Feel the nut is on. Let's work on the other side. Now the bolt hole appears to be lined up much better on this side. Now I'm going to tighten this up. Tighten up the bolts on the other side. Now the front mount here calls for 4 of these carriage bolts. Now the instructions suggest that you take the carriage bolts and insert them through like this. My only concern with that is you're going to have to tighten up the nuts back here. And I'm not sure if I'm going to have the clearance to get a socket wrench back in here. Because 1, you'll notice that the bolts point down slightly, and 2, this is your only access in here, so it's going to be very challenging. I'll try it just to see what happens. I think an easier way to do this would be to have these carriage bolts face out, but then you're going to have a nut that could potentially catch on your clothing, so well, that was a pain in the neck. Took about 15 minutes, but I did get all 4 carriage bolts good and tight. So the splitter is securely fastened to the upper portion of the stand. Now the final thing I need to do is just take my 13mm socket on my impact and just tighten up all these other 13mm bolts that keep the rest of the stand together. So I have the unit assembled, and it's relatively easy to move on a paved or solid surface. However, these tiny wheels are definitely going to make it a bit challenging to move on rough or grassy surfaces. Now what I'm going to do now is tilt the machine 90 degrees, And we're going to check the hydraulic reservoir prior to operating just to ensure that it is within range. So if you take a look at the wedge side of the splitter, you're going to notice that there are two plugs. The black plug should be our hydraulic fill and dipstick. So let's check that real quick. And then this device right here, this is our bleeder screw. Now, from my understanding, the instructions state that whenever you're operating the splitter, you want this bleeder screw cracked. However, when you're moving it around and transporting it and checking the oil level, you want that bleeder screw to be closed. I see two lines on there like you would see on any other dipstick. I don't know if we thread it back down or not. Thread it down halfway and kind of see where we're at. It looks like we're at the top of the second line. So I'd say that this unit is full on hydraulic fluid. Now I'm going to try and tip the unit back upright. I will say tipping the unit is heavy and awkward if you couldn't tell. Trying to pick it from right here, I don't really have enough leverage to bring it over, so it's almost like you gotta bend. Yeah, this is much better. A little bit harder on the knees, but... Okay. So I'm gonna wheel this splitter outside in a moment here and kind of give you my initial thoughts, and we'll go to a quick test. But something that is driving me nuts, and I noticed it in the shipping box too, but I wasn't gonna say anything. I found that there's a lot of little metal BBs, almost like welding slag BBs. And you can see it a little bit there on the aluminum. These are some really small ones. There's a few right here. Also, if you look down here by the fill, hydraulic fill, you can see them all sitting on the aluminum right there. And this wouldn't be a big deal, but what concerns me is you're dealing with a hydraulic system here, and it makes me wonder if any of these metal BBs got into the hydraulic system, because if those BBs get into the hydraulic system, well, it's going to wreak havoc and definitely shorten the lifespan of the unit. So who's ever in charge of quality control, packaging, look into that, because just finding these BBs all over the place doesn't give me a warm and fuzzy feeling for sure. Like, look at all these metal BBs right next to that hydraulic ram. If I take my finger and go over it, you can see that there, just kind of sitting there. So that is a problem, and that needs to be improved. Alright, so now I'd like to do a quick overview of this splitter, and then we'll test it out. So, motor. The shroud is actually a little bit loose, not sure if that's intentional or not. I'm thinking I'm probably going to tighten that up, otherwise there's going to be a nasty rattle. But this is in a 1 3/4 horsepower, 15 amp rated motor. So my recommendation, you're probably going to want to have a 20 amp dedicated outlet for this unit, because chances are you're going to use an extension cord, and when you use extension cords, it reduces the amperage that you're going to be able to receive out of an outlet. So heavy duty gauge extension cord, 20 amp dedicated circuit, my recommendations. They advertise that this unit can split with 6.5 tons of force. I have no way to test that, so I'm not 100% sure there. Now, I've already cracked the bleeder screw open, and again, when you're using this unit, you want to crack that bleeder screw open. But as for our controls, we have a push button right here that turns on the motor, and then we have a lever right here that tells the ram to extend. That turns on the hydraulic pressure to the ram. So let's try turning on the motor. And we'll push down the hydraulic lever and extend the ram. And then if you hold down this lever, the hydraulic ram will stay in place, and then you let go, it retracts. A little bit of a squeak. Another thing that I'm noticing, I don't know if you heard it a moment ago, but I heard this shroud rattling on the motor. You hear that rattle? When I put a finger on it, it kind of stops it. So I do plan to tighten up that shroud. In fact, let me do that now. It almost seems like these screws are bottomed out. I don't want to strip them by forcing them any further, so looks like I'm actually going to have to remove these screws and then add a washer to kind of dampen the noise. So I've added 2 washers to this Phillips head screw. Let's give this a try and see if that does the trick in putting some compression on this shroud. Oh yeah, that helps. Now there's 2 more and I gotta tighten up, so let me do that off camera now. Alright, I have that motor shroud tightened up with those washers, so let's run this through a few cycles and see if that hydraulic motor quiets down a little bit. Definitely a lot better. Much quieter. I'm guessing that's some of the air getting out of the hydraulic system there. That's why we had that bleeder screw open. I'm checking the screw right now, it's loose. So after cycling the unit through probably 15 times, it's gotten a bit quieter, but I notice when it gets to about the last 5 inches, it starts to get a little bit noisy, like there's air being pushed out. I'm kind of thinking maybe that's a safety feature, because when that hydraulic motor is going and you max out that cylinder, the hydraulic pump is still running. Well, you need a place for that excessive pressure to go, so it's probably just circulating it back into the holding tank. That would be my guess. Right about there. And I guess that makes sense, right? Just circulating back into the tank. Also, you do have a little holding puck on the other side of the splitter here, which I'll kind of show you this. This is one of my favorite things about this splitter thus far. So if you're only splitting, say, 20-inch pieces, you have this little holding puck right here. If you want it to retract back all the way, you can just loosen up this nut, tighten it up to the length of the pieces that you're splitting. That way, you save time because you're not allowing that piston to retract all the way back and then it has to go forward. I think that makes sense. Now finally, I'm going to test this unit out with this piece of ash. This is a piece of dead ash, very wet, 10 inches in diameter. Let's see what this baby can do. We'll say, barely any strain on the motor. You can just see how stringy this stuff is. I normally like to have a little hatchet nearby, that way I can kind of chop through that stringy, grainy wood. But just for the purposes of this video, I'd say it went through that pretty effortlessly. Try her again. This time I'm going to use this little set screw right here to prevent the piston from retracting back all the way. Very smooth. You could hear that there was a little more strain on the motor that time, but we were going through some knotty stuff. So far, so good. Definitely getting quieter as I use it more. So I think the motor just has to break in a little bit, but overall, I'd say I'm pretty darn happy with the unit so far. Now I'd like to conclude this video with my initial impression. So let's start off with the negatives. So first things first, the shroud on the motor, those fasteners weren't tapped all the way into the motor, therefore they couldn't secure that shroud. I fixed it with a couple of flat washers, not a big deal, but Bilt Hard, just something to look into, because somebody who isn't prepared, that doesn't have the washers, that rattle can be very annoying, but I got it quieted down. Another issue is the manufacturing cleanliness. I don't know where all these little metal steel BBs came from, but as a consumer, that's something that I find absolutely unacceptable, especially being around that hydraulic cylinder, because I feel like that definitely can and will shorten the life of the hydraulic system. So I don't know what's going on there. I would like a response from the company as to what that is all about, and I will update you guys if I hear anything back from the company. Moving on to the good though. Stability. I'm really impressed with the stability of this unit for an electric log splitter. This thing feels quite solid. Finish, really nice job with the powder coat. Don't see any defects in the powder coat. Really like the colors, the blue and black scheme. Very nice. Additionally, the welds. Really nice job on the welding. I don't see any inadequate or faulty welds. No porosity. Really clean, good penetration. So I feel like in terms of craftsmanship, pretty darn good. Aside from that, the hydraulic system is definitely a little bit noisy on startup, but I think I'm finding that the more I use this unit, the hydraulic system is just breaking in a little bit, and I expect that to get quieter as I move along here in the testing of this unit. So that's going to conclude today's video. Now, the next video I have planned for this unit, I'm going to do some modifications. Main modification, I plan to build a splitting table and maybe a few other things, not 100% sure. And then the following video, the third video I plan to make on this unit, I'm going to put it through some pretty rigorous tests. I'm going to go through some much larger rounds, some really knotty wood, and we'll see what this unit can actually do. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment if you have anything to say, and as always, I will catch you on the next one.